On the surface, Ashland looked like a postcard from a forgotten decade. White fences, church bells on Sunday, kids on porches drinking lemonade under their mama's watchful eye. But beneath the smiles and sweet tea, the town carried a stench that no wind could blow away. It was the kind of place where black folks knew better than to speak too loud, where the sheriff's handshake with a white man could mean a death sentence for someone else. The kind of town that held onto its history like a Bible with blood on its pages. And today, that town was about to remember something it thought it had buried. The Greyhound bus screeched to a stop just outside the town limits. Dust clouded the air as two men stepped off, identical in face, in stride, in silence, tall, cut like stone. Their skin glistened dark under the hot southern sun. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Jaden and Malik Walker, twins, sons of Ashland, gone for 7 years without a trace. Some said they died in some war overseas. Others whispered about prison or worse. But no one expected them to come back. And no one was ready for what they had become. Their mother's house was still standing. Barely. Peeling paint, busted steps, the same crooked mailbox hanging on one screw. Malik ran his hand across the wood like touching a ghost. Jaden just watched the street. A pickup truck rolled by, slow. 2 white men inside. One smirked. The other spat out the window, just enough to say, "You don't belong here." Jaden didn't blink. Malik's jaw tightened. This town had never belonged to them. Not really. But the twins weren't here to belong. They were here to bury something, or someone. What no one in Ashland knew, what no one could know, was that after they vanished, they didn't go to prison. They didn't go to college. They were taken, hand-picked by a program that didn't officially exist, trained in silence, forged in war, conditioned to fight, kill, vanish. And now, those weapons were back home. And Ashland had no idea it was about to become ground zero, because rot doesn't go quietly. And these boys weren't here for redemption. They were here for reckoning. It started the moment they stepped into town. The silence wasn't quiet. It was loaded. Every footstep echoed with memories people didn't want back. Every doorway they passed seemed to suck in its breath. Jaden and Malik felt it. Not just the heat on their skin, but the weight behind every glance, every muttered word that stopped the second they turned their heads. At the gas station, an old white man in overalls pumped diesel and stared. Not like someone curious, like someone measuring the distance between himself and his shotgun. Jaden locked eyes with him for one long, still second. The man looked away first, but not before spitting on the ground, slow and deliberate, right where the twins were about to walk. At Miller's Market, the same old woman who used to give them candy as kids now pretended not to see them. But her hand trembled as she scanned their groceries. She didn't speak, not even the usual, "Have a nice day." Just pushed the receipt across the counter with 2 fingers, like she was sliding a dead rat. Outside, a white teenage boy watched from across the street. His baseball cap said, "Proud Southern Blood." His phone was out, recording, smirking, waiting for a reaction. Malik turned his head, staring him down, but the boy only laughed, like it was all a game. At Sweet Lou's Diner, they sat at the same booth they used to as kids. No one came to take their order, no menus, no water, just eyes, watching, judging, whispering. They shouldn't be back. Thought they was dead. Should have stayed gone. And then came the waitress, white, mid-50s, the kind that called everyone honey except them. She slammed down 2 cups of water. No smile, no welcome. "Don't think you'll find what you're looking for here," she said. "Places changed." Jaden raised an eyebrow. "Looks the same to me." She leaned in. "No, we remember, and we don't forget." Malik's fingers tapped once on the table, a quiet signal. Not yet. They drank the water, tasted the metal in it, stood up and left. Not a word, not a scene. The town watched them walk down Main Street like it was watching wolves circle a barn. But they didn't see wolves. They saw prey. They didn't know. Not yet. It was supposed to be just a run. The sky hung low over Ashland like a lid waiting to seal the rot inside. The air was thick, the streets half lit, empty. Jayden and Malik jogged in silence along the edge of Route 9, past rusted-out mailboxes and crooked porch lights. No music, no headphones, just their breath, steady and sharp, in sync. They ran this late on purpose. Fewer eyes, fewer questions. But even the dark had eyes in Ashland. They were coming back down the hill near the abandoned sawmill when they saw the pickup. Old, beat up, Confederate flag across the back window. 4 white guys in the truck bed, one in the cab, doors open, music blaring. Leonard Skynyrd, of course. The stench of cheap beer drifted across the road before the first word even hit the air. "Hey, boy!" Jayden and Malik kept running. No flinch, no look. "You deaf, monkey?" I said, "Hey." Malik slowed, just slightly. Jayden didn't, but he felt it, the burn under his brother's skin, the tension like coiled wire. A bottle flew, shattered near their feet. Laughter, loud, ugly. "Look at 'em, all grown up. Ain't you the ones used to live down on Beach Street?" "Yeah, I remember. Your mama still cleaning houses for white folks?" Malik stopped. Jayden turned, slow and deliberate, and joined him. The 5 men approached, not fast, leisurely, like a walk through a field, like nothing could go wrong. They were drunk, but not too drunk to hate. One had a chain wrapped around his forearm. Another wore brass knuckles like jewelry. One of them, the tallest, had no weapon, just a grin. That kind of smile that thinks history is still on his side. "You boys forgot where you are," he said. "We don't run in this town unless something's chasing us." Jayden didn't speak. Malik's fists clenched at his sides, knuckles white. "Come on," the tall one said, stepping closer. "What's the matter? Thought you tough now? Thought you could come back here with your big city shoes and scare somebody?" "Nah," one of the others added. "They soft. All muscle, no bite." He pushed Malik in the chest. Hard. Silence. Jayden looked at his brother. Malik looked back. 1,000 conversations passed between them in that one glance. But still, they held. Jayden spoke, voice low. "Walk away." The men laughed. One spit on Malik's shoe. Or what? For a moment, time folded in on itself. The night got quieter. Even the bugs stopped humming. Malik exhaled, slow. "You don't want to know." More laughter. But now, nervous, uncertain. The tall one stepped forward again, lifted a hand to shove Jayden. And that's when a dog barked in the distance. A porch light flicked on somewhere. Jayden moved first, but not to strike. He stepped back, turned, grabbed Malik's shoulder. "Not here," he said. "Not tonight." And just like that, they walked away. No blood, no roar, no fight. But it wasn't mercy. It was control. The kind of control that rattles the bones of men too used to feeling powerful. The kind of control that said, "Next time, we won't walk." The white boys stood in the dark, laughter fading, confidence draining like warm beer in the gutter. They had no idea they'd just survived their last clean breath. The spark was lit. The fire hadn't come yet, but it was already too late. They had thought the worst was over. They were wrong. At dawn, long before the town stirred, a hail of stones shredded the Mrs. Walker's front windows. Jayden woke to the crash of glass, to the same rotten fear he'd felt as a child, the fear that even blood ties offered no protection here. He slid from his bed in bare feet and saw the porch splintered, the lawn littered with shards and rusted nails. On the white siding, someone spray-painted in jagged letters, "Back to the jungle, niggers!" His heart hammered, but his jaw clenched. He said nothing. Malik, down the block, was running errands, picking up textbooks for night classes, when a squad of dark shapes cornered him in a narrow alley. "Look who it is, our favourite little coon," one slurred, and the others howled. They shoved him against the brick wall, knives glinting in the low light. Malik's spine ached as one pressed the blade to his throat. Another rifled his bag, tossing books into the mud. "Gimme your shoes, you jungle bunny," they jeered. Malik let the wind whoosh in his ears while he watched his only pair of kicks sail into a puddle of sewage. They laughed as they walked away, leaving his trembling fingers to fish out soggy pages of African history. By midday, Jayden made his way to Miller's Market, determined to survey the damage and warn his brother. Instead, he found the same 5 drunks from the sawmill, filing in like they owned the place. One grabbed Jayden's arm as he passed the cereal aisle and spat in his face. "Thought you were better'n us? You ain't shit but a black dog." Jayden felt the spit slide down his cheek, liquid contempt, and something inside him snapped like a dry twig under boot. Before the man could swing, Jayden ducked. His fist drove into the man's ribs, eliciting a grunt and a tumble over a shopping cart. The rest piled on, boots and fists and racist curses, until Jayden tasted blood and dust on his tongue. The butcher's cleaver behind the counter glinted, but no one stopped it. No one dared. When he staggered out, teeth loose and vision blurred, Malik was waiting in an unmarked sedan. His ribs burned, his back ached from the alley. They looked at each other. 2 wounded predators, no longer willing to be prey. Jayden spoke first, voice low and cold as broken glass. "They think this is a game." Malik nodded, clutching his side. "Let's teach them the rules." Their silence was over. The rot in this town had shown its face. And now, so would their fury. They drove past the spray-painted house, the empty storefront, the broken glass glinting like blood in the sun. Behind the wheel, Jayden's knuckles were white. In the passenger seat, Malik let his breath out slow, tasting the promise of reckoning. The whisper went out. The twins had drawn their line. No more mercy. No more running. Ashland would remember their names and tremble. Steel gates, barbed wire, and the smell of rot. That was the first waking memory Jayden had of the base in Eastern Europe. No flags flew here, only the stench of sweat, oil, and broken bones. Flashback. Night 1. They arrived in the dead of winter. Snow packed into their uniforms like concrete. A hulking sergeant, pale as a corpse, paced before them, rifle butt thudding against the frozen ground. "Welcome to Hell's Furnace, you worthless N-Ace," he spat, his voice low and cruel. "Here, you are nothing. You will crawl and kill on command, or you will die screaming into the snow." Jayden and Malik exchanged a glance. No protest, no fear. They learned fast that defiance meant a bullet to the back of the skull. Routine. Break bodies. Forge souls. Every dawn, the twins woke to screams. In the pit, men fought until teeth flew and ribs cracked. Trainers hosed them down with ice-cold water, torture to break the mind. Then, in ragged formation, they ran through minefields without minesweeper dogs. Those who panicked paid with a noisy end. A single shot at dawn, their bodies left as a warning. One day, Jayden was ordered to execute a deserter, an unarmed recruit who'd collapsed in tears. The sergeant watched with satisfaction as Jayden's trembling hand squeezed the trigger. The man fell, his last word a choked apology. Rituals of humiliation. They were stripped naked on parade ground and forced to wear signs. "I am a savage. N of the West." Disposable. Laughter echoed from guard towers as cameras clicked. They marched through villages. Civilians sneered, spat in their faces, called them jungle beasts. No one intervened. No one cared. Malik learned to turn each insult into fuel. Jayden turned each kick to steel in his gut. Under that frozen sky, they became living weapons, honed by hate. Missions beyond the headlines. They weren't just test subjects. They were deployed for black ops, silent assassinations, high-value extractions, bodies that never made the evening news. They killed diplomats, warlords, and traitors, erasing footprints in bullet holes and burned villages. Malik once watched a target, a crooked politician, plead in broken English, begging for mercy. The twins stood over him for a heartbeat, then Jayden slit his throat. The eyes that met theirs were the same eyes they'd seen in Ashland's diner. Contempt, fear, dehumanization. Survival above all in Hell's Furnace. Only two things mattered. Obey orders or die. They learned to read shadows, enemy patrols, booby traps, traitors among their own ranks. They swapped horror stories in whispered tones, the recruit buried alive for refusing an order, the night mission where their own mortar fire mistargeted them. They laughed through it, because laughter was the only refusal left. Return to Ashland. When the program declared them successful, they were let go, veterans without home, soldiers without medals. Their faces returned to Ashland's streets, but the crucible never left them. A thrown stone, a racist taunt, the crack of wood against glass. These were mere echoes of what they'd endured. What twisted souls in this small town called Pain was merely the opening bell. For Jaden and Malik, the real war had already been fought and won in the hell that trained them. What lay ahead for Ashland would be no child's game. The next act would prove that the twins' living nightmare was far darker than the town's deepest hate. And Ashland would wish they'd left well enough alone. Night draped over Ashland like a funeral shroud, thick and suffocating. Jaden and Malik donned dark clothes, faces masked by low-brimmed caps. Their hearts pounded not with fear, but with a cold anticipation. The promise of reckoning pulsed in their veins. The first strike. A shadow in the alley. They found him where the neon open sign never reached, an alley behind Miller's Market. The smallest of the 5 drunks, the one who'd spat on Malik's shoe, ducked into the darkness, assuming safety. Instead, he heard 2 soft steps behind him. "Thought you were clever, hiding in the dark," Jaden whispered, voice like ice. The man spun, eyes wide, recognizing the silhouette of the brother he'd humiliated. Malik's boot connected with his ribs, a sick crack echoing off brick walls. The man collapsed, gasping. Jaden knelt, thumb pressing against the bleeding cut beneath the man's eye, then dragged a jagged rock across his cheek, carving a scar that spelled out, "Lesson." "Remember this," Malik said, voice low and distant. "You taught us to bleed shame, now feel it." They left him curled around his own fear, hands pressed to his face, breath hitching until dawn. 2. The Boiling Point, Duran's Dive restroom. At Duran's Dive, the brass-knuckle kid licked imaginary wounds in the grimy mirror. Nobody noticed the twins slip in, until Jaden's hand clamped over the man's mouth. "How does it taste, looking at your reflection after you nearly killed me?" he murmured. Malik's forearm flew, smashing the kid's jaw. The man's flourish of insults died in a garbled gasp. Jaden grabbed the brass knuckles, held them up to the fluorescent flicker. "Your trophy," he said, dropping them into the toilet. "Flush your pride." When the man bent to retrieve them, Malik kicked him in the gut. He doubled over, choking on his own disgrace. The twins stepped back, silhouettes fading into the bar's gloom, leaving the bully to his ruined swagger. 3. The Apex. The Silent Parking Lot. The last and worst, tall, smug, the ringleader, prowled his old pickup in an empty lot, windows down, music blaring ancestral hate. He didn't see the brothers slip through the chain-link fence until Jaden yanked the driver's door open. "You think your hate makes you safe?" Jaden asked softly. Malik wrenched the wheel. The truck jolted into the curb. Metal groaned as Jaden hauled the man out by his collar. Moonlight glinted on knives, brass knuckles, and bruised egos. They worked in tandem. Jaden baited him with words, racist slurs spit back to remind him of his own venom, while Malik delivered precise, punishing strikes to ribs, throat, and kneecaps. Each hit was a verdict. Each curse returned like a boomerang. "You prized your power," Malik said, voice razor-sharp. "Here's your new value. Nothing." When sirens wailed far off, the twins retreated into the night, leaving him kneeling on gravel, blood mixing with dust and humiliation. A fall. Aftermath. Shadows carved in flesh. By dawn, whispers raced through Ashland, mutilated braggers crawling home, dark messages scrawled on walls. "Fear is earned. And no signs of the brothers except footprints in broken glass. No bullets, no bodies, just scars, physical and psychological. They hunted not to kill, but to teach, to rip away the arrogance that fueled every racist taunt. Ashland's night became their proving ground, and its darkest corners bore witness to a simple truth. Cruelty demands a price. The hunt had begun, and with it, the town of Ashland realized the twins would not rest until every last slur and sneer was paid back in full. Ashland awoke under a pall of dread. Dawn light filtered through drawn curtains and shuttered windows, washing empty streets in ashen grey. No children skipped to school. No trucks rumbled down Main Street. Even the birds held their breath, as if they knew that they too might become witnesses. Whispered rumours spread from porch to porch like wildfire. They struck again last night. I saw a brother covered in blood. Someone spray-painted new threats on Baker's fence. But nobody spoke those words aloud. At Sweet Lou's diner, the chrome stools stood vacant behind the counter. The waitresses hovered anxiously near the coffee urn, afraid to pour too freely. When a lone farmer dared to enter at mid-morning, he stayed silent as he sipped his bitter brew. His eyes darted to the empty booths where Jaden and Malik once sat, and he swallowed hard at the sight of closed after-hours scrawl on the grease-splattered window. He left a crumpled dollar on the counter and fled into the street, head bowed, shoulders hunched against the invisible weight of judgment. Across the street at Miller's Market, deliveries lay uncollected, produce wilted in the bins. The clerk, a middle-aged white man with trembling hands, refused to make eye contact with any customer. An elderly black woman approached, shopping list in hand, but he hung back behind the register as if she were coated in something contagious. On her way out, she noticed fresh spray paint on the brick wall. "Niggers go home." The letters looked jagged and cruel in the morning sun. She pressed her purse to her chest and hurried away, head down, tears burning her eyes. In every home, every family, the same hush hung heavy. Neighbours closed their doors at the sound of an unfamiliar car. The patrol cars idled in the station house, lights off, engines running. No officers daring to venture beyond the parking lot. The sheriff's radio crackled intermittently, but no calls for service came through. On the front steps of Mrs. Walker's house, the broken windows had been crudely boarded, but no one offered to help. A sign read simply, "Pray for peace." Yet the only prayer on anyone's lips was a silent plea not to become the next target. Down by the old church, the steeple cast a long shadow over empty pews. Pastor Vance stood before an abandoned pulpit, clutching his Bible as though it might speak to him. He cleared his throat, but no voice answered. Outside, the congregation had retreated, afraid that gathering in numbers might draw the twins' wrath. Or worse, the vigilantes who once met in secret to protect their own. The organ keys sat untouched, as if fear itself had frozen every note. And when he finally prayed, it was not for salvation, but for the courage to speak truth in a town that had made cowardice its best defense. On the fringes of Ashland, the black community waited in silent solidarity. Old Mrs. Johnson and her neighbours replaced the spray-painted slurs on the community centre with fresh coats of paint, whitewashing not just walls, but their own trembling fear. Yet every brushstroke felt like a confession. They had no power here, only the fragile comfort of invisible unity. At dusk, small groups gathered in backyards to whisper urgent strategies: where to hide, when to flee, how to warn their children that the only safety lay beyond Ashland's borders. Despite the terror, rumours of movement circulated, flickers of light in deserted alleys, shapes slipping through shadows near the cotton mill. The legend of the twins had grown beyond their flesh and blood. They were now a ghost story whispered by frightened tongues. In every corner store, shopkeepers eyed the empty registers, certain that the next raid might take their livelihood, their dignity, or their lives. The air itself felt armed with accusation, as if each person bore witness to their own complicity. As night fell again, street lamps flickered on like wary sentinels. The hush deepened, charged with the knowledge that Ashland had become a cage of its own design. Fear was the unspoken language everyone knew, and in that silence, the entire town felt the twins' presence, looming, watchful, unstoppable. No one could say who would be the next victim, or where the violence would erupt, but in that pregnant moment before darkness fully claimed the streets, everyone understood that Ashland's rot had risen to the surface, and it would no longer be buried in whispers. The hunt had claimed its territory, the hearts of every man, woman, and child, white and black alike, trembled beneath its weight. The wind carried the acrid tang of kerosene and old sweat as Ashland's patriarchs gathered in the basement of the Vance farmhouse. The low, flickering light revealed lined faces, yellowed teeth, and uniforms festooned with ribbons from wars no one dared ask about. These were the keepers of the old order, men who remembered segregation with a fondness, who taught Sunday school lessons about law and decency, yet made no secret of what decency meant when it came to black boys. At the head of the table, an antique mahogany desk scarred by decision after decision, sat Sheriff Earl Whitaker, silver hair slicked back, spectacles perched on the tip of his nose. He tapped a War of 61-era Colt Smith & Wesson with a white-knuckled hand. "They've forced our hand," he growled. "We've given warnings, pastors' prayers, city council petitions, even County Judge Wallace's gentleman's agreement. They laughed. They spat on us. Now we act. For the good of Ashland." A chorus of low mutters rippled through the room. Old Sergeant Clayton King, one arm missing from shrapnel in '68, nodded. His wooden stump tapped the floor in an impatient rhythm. "I'll bring the shotguns," he said. "Got 5 shells per man, enough to scare 'em off." Behind him, Pastor Vance, eyes rimmed red, unfurled a folded map of the cotton mill's service entrance. Marks in chalk indicated guard towers and access roads. "They'll slip in from that back gate," Vance hissed. "We cut the power. We cut their exits. Tonight, we restore order." They passed around a beat-up duffel of improvised weapons, Molotovs with torn rags, hunting knives dulled and oiled, brass knuckles that had once cracked skulls for nigger troublemakers. The air was thick with anticipation and the iron taste of righteous fear. Outside, the town slept, or pretended to. Every family home, shuttered and silent, waited for the coming storm. Rumors of the twins' midnight hunts had spread. A broken pickup, a shattered storefront, that strange spray paint on the Watson barn. "Black devils, we're coming." No one imagined the meaning of that phrase better than these men. Under a sickle moon, the old guard moved like a ghost militia. They split into pairs, each clutching a torch or a rifle. Clayton limped toward the grain silo gate. Sheriff Whitaker and 2 others fanned out along the service road. Pastor Vance and young Deputy Ross, untried, eager, took position by the power box. For them, this was a righteous crusade, to punish the insolence of these uppity N.S. who dared to fight back. They sniggered as they recalled the diner attack, the alley mutilation. Proof, they thought, that mere boys could be cowed by iron and fire. At the silo gate, Clayton raised his shotgun. "Come out with your hands up," he barked. "No more games." Silence answered him. Only the crickets mocked. Moments later, a single figure stepped into the weak torchlight, a silhouette too tall, too steady. Jaden's voice cut into the hush. "You've had your fun, old man. Time's up." Clayton blinked. His finger twitched on the trigger. A Molotov shattered against the corrugated wall, showering sparks. From the service road, Malik appeared, rifle in hand. He aimed not to kill, but to disarm, knowing that bitumen and gasoline made deadly partners. The old guard froze as the 2 brothers emerged, silhouettes framed by the fire's glow and the moon behind them. Their faces, calm, implacable, made every veteran's blood run cold. "You call this justice?" Jaden said, "or a lynch mob in fancy clothes?" Clayton raised the shotgun, but Whitaker grabbed his arm. "Stand down," the sheriff hissed, yet his voice shook. Malik strode forward, boots cracking the gravel. "We came home to be hunted. You think your shells and torches scare us? You haven't faced what we carry in our bones. Behind the old guard, a Molotov flared as Pastor Vance's torch fell. Deputy Ross stumbled back, cursing. In the flicker of light, the men saw their own reflections in Jayden's cold eyes, hunted, cornered, obsolete. In that charged silence, they understood. Their reign of terror had birthed monsters, not boys. The old guard had thought to rouse ghosts of the past. Instead, they released demons tempered in a far darker crucible. Sheriff Whitaker lowered the shotgun, palms open in surrender. We didn't know. You did, Malik said. You always did. A roar of engines shattered the moment. Half the town's cars barreling toward the cotton mill. Neighbors drawn by the commotion, by the flames, by the knowledge that Ashland was tearing itself apart. The brothers exchanged a glance. Their hunt would not end here. Another night's war awaited. But for now, the old guard lay disarmed, humiliated before the very suns they'd tried to break. Ashland's justice had collided with a vengeance far beyond their imagining. And the old guard would carry that shame as an unhealed wound, proof that some horrors cannot be undone. Heavy footsteps on cracked concrete marked the collapse of one order, and whispered the dawning of another, darker reign. The twins vanished into the shadows once more, leaving behind smouldering torches and broken men, and a town awakening to the true cost of its buried sins. Moonlight poured through ragged clouds as Ashland's militia gathered in the cornfield's edge, torches flickering like dying souls, rifles cradled in calloused hands. They had tracked the twins here, convinced that Jayden and Malik would seek sanctuary among the stalks. Instead, they walked into an executioner's arena. I sat the ambush. A coughing cadence of marching feet broke the midnight hush. The vigilantes, scratch priest veterans, beefy farmhands, a handful of high school boys with driftwood shotguns, slipped into the corn, hissing racial slurs that echoed off the rustling leaves. Niggers'll rot in this field. Time to bring the jungle beasts home. They fanned out in a loose semicircle, torches raised, eyes gleaming with vindictive fervor. Clayton King swore under his breath, squinting down the barrel. Sheriff Whitaker's gaunt face glowed white under the flames. Pastor Vance trembled but gripped his Molotov. A distant footstep, light, precise, echoed between the rows. Jayden emerged first, hat low, eyes scanning the dying stalks. Malik followed a pace behind, muscles coiled, every nerve blazing. They paused, heartbeats synchronizing with a drum of terror rising in the crowd. So, the first strike. A howl split the field. Someone fired prematurely. A shot ripped through a cornstalk, shattering mute anticipation into a storm of bullets. Jayden ducked, the crack of slug against his jacket sounding like a whip. Malik dove sideways, tearing at the stalks, his breath ragged with adrenaline. They hit back not with rage, but with the cold precision of trained soldiers. Jayden vaulted atop a rusted tractor half buried in the furrows, picking off shooters one by one. A farmhand falling with a hollow gasp, clutching his chest. A teenager's scream cut short as he crumpled into the dirt. Malik stalked through the ravaged rows, kicking torches into piles of dry husks, turning torchlight into inferno. 3. The slaughter. The militia panicked. Torches wavered. Bullets sprayed indiscriminately into the night, felling friend and foe alike. One by one, they emerged wounded. Old Sergeant Clayton, shotgun arm bleeding, staggered and fell into muddy furrows. Jayden found him clutching his stump, eyes wide with disbelief. A single, precise punch drove Clayton's face into the dirt. Deputy Ross, clutching a rifle bent out of shape, was tripped by Malik and left crawling through mud, his uniform smeared with filth. A boot to his ribs forced the air from his lungs. He lay coughing, too afraid to rise. Pastor Vance, brandishing a Molotov, slipped on crushed corn and lit his own sleeve ablaze. He rolled screaming in a cloud of black smoke, the acrid stench of burning cloth mingling with manure. Jaden let the fire finish its work, stepping back as Vance's cries faded. Between the screams and cracking stalks, the cornfield became a crucible of abject horror. The night air filled with the metallic odor of blood, the wet thud of bodies collapsing, and the broken prayers of a town that had forgotten mercy. 4. The silence after. When the last torch guttered out, the field lay silent, save for the whisper of a dying wind. Jaden and Malik stood amid the carnage, soaked in mud and stained with both enemy blood and their own. They looked down at the broken bodies. Men who had called them animals, who'd come to restore order by lynching them in a field of corn. No cheers rose for their victory. No triumph gleamed in their eyes. Only hollow, cavernous emptiness. The twins exchanged a glance that carried no joy, only the weight of what they'd become. We didn't seek this. We just survived. Jaden reached into his jacket and removed a single battered photograph. Their mother, smiling by the white picket fence before the hate arrived. He crushed it in his fist and let the pieces fall into the soft earth. V. The aftermath. By dawn, the cornfield lay littered with torn uniforms, smashed shotguns, and the desperate remains of torches. The militia's bodies were left in grotesque testimony, half buried in mud, faces twisted in shock, tags still dangling from pockets. No one dared venture here, as if the field itself had become cursed. Jaden and Malik slipped away at first light, walking barefoot through damp earth that clung to their wounds. They did not look back. The June grass of morning brushed their legs, a reminder that the world still breathed beyond this nightmare. In the silent homes of Ashland, doors stayed locked, windows remained shuttered. The townspeople spoke only in broken whispers of the massacre among the corn, of the black spectres who had turned their own terror against them. But none dared to say the word aloud, because Ashland had witnessed its own reflection in that field, stripped of pretense, naked in its hatred, and the twins had shown that hatred its price. They did not leave legends that night. They left scars, physical and spiritual, and as the sun climbed, the empty eyes of those who survived watched the horizon, knowing that Ashland would never be the same, and that the twins, who walked into a field like any men, had emerged as something else entirely. Ghosts born of blood and mud, sustained by the cold truth that sometimes the only choice left is to survive. A small boy sits cross-legged on the living room floor, his eyes glued to the flickering television. On the screen, cornstalks sway under a phantom moon, and two dark silhouettes emerge from the fields, brothers clad in mud and blood. The boy's heart pounds with every crack of rifle fire, every thud of bodies hitting the earth. He leans forward, breath held. Behind him, the muted glow of a lab-white ceiling reflects off dozens of monitors. Rows of scientists hunch over consoles, taking notes on heart rates, pupil dilation, whispered comments. The boy does not see them. He only sees the twins, Jaden and Malik, steeling themselves as a pack of lantern-wielding men advances through the stalks, shouting the N-word the way a butcher might call cattle to slaughter. On screen, a boy no older than the viewer flinches as a Molotov ignites. He screams, not in pain, but in terror, his face smeared with soot, and then a silvery voiceover crackles. Subject Control Group 003. Emotional response. Peak terror at 02.47. Moral alignment shift. 84% empathic toward protagonists. The little boy on the floor grips his blanket, tears welling in his eyes. He doesn't know it, but his pulse is racing at 160 BPM, nearly double the calm baseline the scientists recorded earlier. In a glass-walled observation bay, Dr. Miriam Cole turns away from her screen. She speaks into her mic. Group B is spiraling. Even the most hardened viewers are calling for mercy. The racial slurs triggered immediate disgust, expected, but the depth of emotional collapse is fascinating. Dr. Sanjay Rao next to her glances at the boy on the far side of the control room. Subject 007 refused to continue watching, covered his ears and mouthed, "No more." We've never had such early termination. A junior researcher clears his throat and adds, the humiliation scenes, the forced signs, the chained limbs, the whispered curses, push them beyond measured outrage into genuine fear. Look at these galvanic skin responses. Numbers flash across a screen. 92% uptick in sympathetic tears, 78% vocal protest outbursts. The boy in the living room presses his fist to his mouth. His mother, out of frame, calls, "Time for bed!" But he cannot tear his eyes away. Suddenly, the simulation cuts to static. The screen goes black for a heartbeat, then resumes with the boy, now staring at the camera, soaked in mud and terror, collapsing to his knees. A hush falls over the control room as the boy on the TV looks directly into the lens. His lips tremble. It wasn't supposed to be real. His voice cracks, and the lab monitors pivot away. The scientists exchange uneasy looks. Dr. Cole stands and raises her hand. End simulation. All monitors snap off simultaneously. The control room falls to darkness, except for a single spotlight on the little boy in the real world, blinking back tears at the blank TV screen. One of the senior researchers, Dr. Elena Vargas, steps forward, voice low. Excellent work. We've proven that when race is at stake, the baseline response is tribal contempt. But fear unites them. Dr. Cole turns to the boy, no longer part of the trial, simply a witness. Good job, she says softly. You can go to sleep now. The boy blinks, confused, but safe in his bedroom. Behind them, another scientist adjusts a slide on a digital whiteboard. It reads, "Next experiment, remove race, keep only fear." Dr. Rao whispers to Dr. Vargas, "Let's see if fear alone can break the same barriers, or if it's the poison of prejudice that truly divides us." A beat of silence. Then, as the lights fade in the control room, the final words echo in the quiet. Next experiment. Remove race. Leave only fear. Fade to black.